Despite the fact that cars have long been firmly entrenched in our lives, for many, these mechanisms remain a complex and incomprehensible thing. The current generation of Fabia has been produced since 2007, so there are instances that have skated along our roads for 200, or even more, thousand kilometers. Studying ads for sale is worth starting, having already decided on the power plant and gearbox. 3 engines were offered for this model: 1.2, 1.4, and 1.6. Let's say right away, the more you choose the engine size, the less maintenance costs will be required. It will be warmer in winter and, of course, the car will be more dynamic. However, the disadvantages in the form of a high initial cost and less modest fuel consumption will have to come to terms. The same trend is observed with reliability. The 1.6-liter, 105 horsepower engine is the most unpretentious here. The most pressing problem owners note is the failure of the throttle position sensor. In addition, the node sometimes has to be flushed from deposits. The most valuable advice for owners of this motor will be the recommendation to install a new pump along with the timing repair kit replacement procedure. Less powerful engines 1.2, 70 horsepower, and 1.4, 86 horsepower, have a harder life in our conditions, especially in winter. They are not as good in cold starts and take noticeably longer to warm up. The same units were marked by frequent failures of the ignition coils, so it is better to take the choice of gas stations responsibly. It is also necessary to wash the space under the hood very carefully. For a 1.2-liter 3-cylinder engine, an expensive replacement of the timing chain drive will be required closer to 100,000 kilometers. If you really wanted to get your hands on a 70 horsepower Fabia, it would not be superfluous to check the engine for oil smudges, which are not uncommon here. Transmission. On the used car market, you can buy a Fabia in the Monte Carlo configuration, which has a 1.2-liter, 105 horsepower, turbo engine and a 7-speed DSG robot under the hood. So far, these units can be judged only by other models of the concern, since this version appeared only after restyling in 2010. Let's say right away, for those who want to minimize the cost of a car, this version is best avoided. But with complete confidence, you can buy a Fabia with a manual transmission, which will delight you with clear shifts and endurance. There is one weak point, however. The presence of a kind of roar with the engine running may mean an early replacement of the input shaft bearings of the box. This sound is often confused with the howl of the clutch release mechanism, so for accurate diagnosis it is better to contact a specialist. The basket itself, together with the disc, usually takes care of at least 120 to 150,000 kilometers. Automatic transmission can only be found with Unit 1.6. Serve 150,000 km for this transmission, just spit. However, after this mark, some owners had problems with the valve body. CV joints, provided that the integrity of the anthers is maintained, live indefinitely. The brakes will not need to be dealt with until the odometer crosses the 60,000 threshold. Around this run, the front pads are erased. Suspension. Suspension Skoda Fabia is as simple as 3 pennies, McPherson, in front, elastic beam, in the back, but knocks and squeaks from somewhere below periodically disturb the ear. Fortunately, the first costs will be quite small. So, on a run of 30 to 40,000 kilometers, it will be necessary to change the stabilizer struts. Then, after the same amount, the bushings, which, in principle, are also inexpensive, will outlive their own. And only for the third such stage you need to prepare thoroughly, since a run of more than 100 to 120,000 kilometers may require considerable finances to replace the thrust bearings, steering tips and rods, silent blocks of the front levers, as well as all shock absorbers. However, it is worth remembering that knocks from below do not always mean an early intervention in the suspension. The weak point of the car was the so-called gearbox cushion, which loses its integrity earlier than many expect from it. Most questions are caused by instances of the Kaluga assembly. So, the owners, pointing out the weak points of the model, pay attention to the fifth door, which, due to skew, is able to wipe the paint on the rear bumper. For the same reason, the trunk lid lock may stick. This shortcoming is treated simply by adjustment. Approximately the same percentage of Fabia owners at least once found several liters of water in their reserve niche, which appeared after recent rainfall. Thoughtful users know that in this case, the total sizing of the ventilation holes and rubber seals of the lanterns helps. Problems with the rear window washer are also common. But even in this scenario, the owner's money will remain untouched. All that is required is either to return the flown pipe to its place, or to adjust the nozzle that has turned around its axis. Another bottleneck, Skoda Fabia wipers. They clean well, but the weak drive mechanism has limited visibility for many in rainy weather. It's good that the passenger side usually fails. There is nowhere to go, you have to spend money and replace the trapezoid. But it will not be possible to find fault with the hardware of the hatchback. Rust on the body of a Fabia is an extremely rare phenomenon that appears mainly due to accidents. The practical and, surprisingly, roomy interior of the model practically does not annoy with breakdowns. But at any moment, either the notorious crickets from the inside of the panel or the heater fan are ready to sound. Electric. To the electrician in this car, perhaps, the most questions. Even if you do not take into account the recall campaign to replace the seat heating elements, then a small list of other possible malfunctions can be made. The weak points of the model include sticking of the hood and door limit switches, glitches of the central lock, does not respond to the key fob, a short-term failure of the power windows and a breakdown of the engine fan control unit. The impeller does not stop after the engine cools down. And this despite the fact that Fabia has, in principle, a little electronics. And now another review of a used car is filled with an impressive list of breakdowns, which is collected by the owners themselves, turning to the worldwide network for help. Such a flurry of negativity in relation to anything can cause disgust for the most useful things. However, as practice shows, even ladies can easily cope with the maintenance of this model, and the costs for small runs are simply ridiculous. Only a run of more than 100,000 kilometers means a one-time investment of considerable funds. Yes, and then, basically, in the suspension.